And there I go. There I go, explaining it away because I can't help it, because I know that I will be found out as a fraud. Whew, have I got a heavy topic today? No, it's not that heavy. I think this topic may be the most interesting thing I've looked into. You're gonna see a lot of yourself in this video, and it doesn't mean that you like are full-blown suffer, and I'm gonna put that in quotes for a reason. We're gonna talk about it. But it doesn't mean that you full-blown suffer from this syndrome, but everyone deals with these certain feelings at a certain point in their life and to some degree. And I feel like knowing what it's called and knowing more about it almost helps you work through a lot of what you may be feeling from time to time in your life. So today we're talking about imposter syndrome. It is juicy. If you want further resources, everything I use to kind of construct this video is linked below. A lot of the articles I read and like certain things in like peer-reviewed journals, very interesting stuff. And then there's of course just all kinds of stuff on social media, you know. We're gonna get ready as well. I actually already put on this Tear foundation. This is that like, we're not gonna talk about makeup today, but this is that stuff on Amazon. It is like unbelievably gorgeous. Little tiny bit light for me right now, but that's okay. So we're gonna get ready together and chat about this. So what is imposter syndrome? Let's start there. When I heard of that term, I always thought of it as kind of the feeling that you are not good enough at a job, a skill, whatever. And so you're constantly battling this fear of being found out as a fraud, right? As an imposter. You don't really belong there, you know? And that has been really pervasive through my life in young adulthood and well into adulthood. And I think there's a lot of degrees of this and there's different versions of it. And by I think, I mean I know, and we're gonna talk about them. But you kind of agonize over the possibility of being found out, like I said. And it doesn't really matter how much you actually maybe have found success in that field or that job or that whatever. It doesn't really matter, because even when you get praise for what you've done or what you've accomplished, a lot of times you kind of attribute it to like, oh, well, it was just luck or right place at the right time. You basically can't accept that feedback, the positive feedback, because you still feel in your bones that you don't deserve it or that you really shouldn't have this job. Like, I'm not qualified. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know enough. I'm not a genius. I'm not an expert on this. And I think that that feeling, this imposter syndrome feeling, can really hold you back from a lot of the things you probably could actually do or you could accomplish. So one of the things they mention is that it typically more than likely affects someone that is higher achieving or high functioning. I would believe that like a higher percentage of people that deal with this perhaps are higher achievers, but I do think it can just affect anyone. I don't think it really matters what your station in life is, what you do. I think this affects a lot of people, and I think that pretty much everyone in life feels these kinds of feelings at some point. Does that mean you have full-blown imposter syndrome? No. There's a lot of kind of discussion on the internet. I was reading different forums and also just different like peer-reviewed articles, and a lot of discussion of like, is this something you would like medically diagnose or treat? No. But then there are some people that argue, well, but a lot of times this can lead to anxiety and depression. So should we be treating it? I don't even know how you would treat it. We're going to talk about some of the things you can do if you deal with a lot of these feelings. But that's just kind of, if you were curious, the discussion in the medical world, or, you know, that's as much as I know. Some of you guys may know a lot more. You might be in this field and talk about it a lot. Let us know what you find interesting about this, some of your best advice maybe in the comments, because certainly, trust me, I went through imposter syndrome even deciding to do this video, because I'm like, well, I'm not an expert, but I'm like, you don't have to be an expert to talk on subjects you're interested in. I did some research so I don't feel like I'm just talking just from whatever I know, but we're also going to share a lot of just my experience. And there I go. There I go, explaining it away because I can't help it, because I know that I will be found out as a fraud. Like, Jessica, you don't know everything about this. No, I don't. Okay, Jessica, move on. All right. So one of the articles I read said about 25 to 30% of high achievers suffer from imposter syndrome, and around 70% of adults may experience imposterism at least once in their lifetime. I fully believe that. Again, I think there's just levels of it. To me, it's really this deep feeling of inadequacy. And we all feel inadequate at some point in our life, probably at many point in our lives, many times of the year, you know? I am shouting. I'm sorry, guys. This is a good time to say, hey, if you're new here, I'm Jessica. I'm so glad you clicked on this video. This video is part of a series I call Getting Real, and we do deep dives into topics like this. We have done one on perfectionism, which is strongly related to this. We'll talk about that. Definitely check that one out if you're interested in this topic. I think you will love that video. And I've done a couple others as well. We're trying to do these like once a month. I'm loving this. So definitely subscribe. Definitely check out some of my other videos. I also do like vlogs and we just hang out together, which is fun. So what are some of these symptoms of imposter syndrome? Obviously, we've already talked about some of them. I'm gonna pop up this little infographic I just got online, but I was comparing it to a lot of the things I've read and they all kind of match up. So here are some of these symptoms that you may have imposter syndrome. So perhaps you feel like it was luck and not talent that got you where you are. You feel guilty. Oh my gosh. I am so guilty of this one. You feel guilty of your success. And that again ties back to that deep-rooted feeling that you don't belong there. You don't deserve this. You don't know what you're talking about. Pointing out even the smallest mistakes you make. Yeah, I definitely do that. Even down to like when I would have people over and like something, maybe something I cooked was a little bit burnt, or, oh, I didn't have this one ingredient, so it's not as good as it usually is. Like even little things like that, I'm like, why am I pointing that out? Like no one cares. Well, they might care if it's burnt, but you know what I mean. You undervalue your skills and your abilities. You feel unworthy of success. You set very challenging goals and feel disappointed when you fall short. If it isn't perfection, you don't want it. You hide failures so people can't recognize them. I don't know. Sometimes I blast my failures just to like almost get it out of the way. It's like making fun of yourself before someone else can. You know what I mean? You self-doubt and you think that people are being nice to you. They're just being nice when they're complimenting you. They don't really mean it. They're just being nice, you know? So how many of you guys see yourself in any of those symptoms, right? So of course, one of the biggest things with imposter syndrome is that fear of like being found out. Like, oh my gosh, they're gonna find out I don't belong here. I'm gonna get fired. They're gonna think less of me. And a lot of it goes back to that fear of being not liked or not respected. So one thing that kind of took me aback that I felt like I had to sit with this morning and think about was that many articles mentioned that some people will sometimes avoid success or higher like amounts of notoriety for that fear of you're going to have higher expectations. And if you're already like, you already have that tendency towards perfectionism, which is strongly connected to this, you're creating an even higher expectation, a higher mental load, a higher workload, like, and it just feels so overwhelming. And you feel like, well, then if I am even more successful, I'm really going to be found out as a fraud because I don't know what I'm doing and I don't deserve this and I don't belong here. I found that fascinating. I definitely can see that in myself to a certain degree. Like even when I was teaching, I feel like if I were to be offered like another thing, like, oh, would you like to be a lead teacher? Would you like to? I'd be like, no. How could I possibly do that? Then people will really find out that I'm a fraud. And another thing that I found interesting about this idea is that it kind of goes something like this. You're faced with a new obstacle or goal or task, and you either do one of two things. You over prepare because you're like, well, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'd better way over prepare for this to meet my high expectation because I don't want to be found out. Or you procrastinate and then you do hurried, sloppy work. And then you're really fearful that they're going to find out. So it's just like this double-edged sword. You know what I mean? So I found this really interesting too. I'm going to put this graphic up and leave it up for a second. So these are different types of imposter syndrome. And I think you can kind of be all versions, some versions, one version, a mixed bag, you know. There's no one size fits all. But the first one is the perfectionist. So they're always looking for things to go perfectly. Little errors give you so much shame, so much guilt. Another version is the superhero. So this is someone that your success is based on how many different roles can I play? How many different hats can I wear? How many different balls can I juggle at the same time? And of course, you can't perfectly do that. And so when you can't, you feel like a failure or a fraud. Another version is the expert, where you try to learn absolutely everything you can. And when, you know, one person points out, well, you didn't know this, then you spiral. You feel like a fraud, you know, you don't know everything. Another version is the natural genius. So they expect to meet high goals quickly and effortlessly. When things get difficult, they feel very ashamed. Okay, this is one I'm right in this moment realizing that I identify with. Not that I am a natural genius. Okay, please do not twist my words. But if you were someone that was a high achiever as a kid, maybe you got really good grades, and so you felt like you always had to get good grades. So you were always, that was my world, okay? And I'm thankful for that to a certain degree because I am proud of my academic accomplishments. But I do find in adulthood that because some things came easier to me as a kid, that when something in adulthood doesn't make sense to me and I have to actually do work, I'm like, wait, what? And I know that it sounds the way it sounds. I don't know how else to explain it, but I had to teach myself that, Jessica, I was good at doing school, but that doesn't always translate into being good at solving problems in real life. And that could take us down a whole rabbit hole. Okay, we're not going down that rabbit hole. But my point is, I think that I definitely see a lot of myself in that. Okay, and then another version is the soloist. They want to do things alone, no help from anyone else. And they kind of view needing help as a weakness. The one question I had, and I wonder if you guys are wondering too, is, okay, what causes this? What in the world would make me this way? Would make me feel like I don't deserve anything? So one thing that may cause it is if you were someone that performed well academically and then you had that pressure to perform well academically as a kid. Or I would say on the same vein, if you performed well in a sport or in something like that where it required talent or skill or something you practiced at and got better at, and you were expected to achieve at certain levels, I think that's the same thing. You know what I mean? Of course, perfectionists, which again relates to a lot of what I just said, which is the being pressured to perform at a certain level, whether it's academically, sports-wise, with a violin, whatever. And I think along the veins of perfectionism, a lot of times you do set those goals so high for yourself because you are a perfectionist and you want it to be perfect, but then on top of that, you feel like you have to do that so that you aren't found out. And then again, another cause is just being in competitive environments, whether that's when you were younger, like I said, with sports or whatever. And that can be a good thing too. I mean, competition can be a good thing, but that is one indicator. But even competitive academically, again, it doesn't have to just be sports. I want to share my experience with this. So the way I thought through it in a way to try to think of specific examples is my 3 big time jobs I had in adulthood. So that would be theater, teaching, and YouTube. 3 very different worlds in so many ways. Also kind of interrelated though. It's no wonder I like doing these videos because it kind of involves a lot of the things I love. But anyway, okay. Now all I got to do is write a song and sing it at the end, and then it'll really tie in everything I love. So, okay, let's start with theater. I remember so vividly auditioning for the school I ended up going to musical theater for. Did I say that? Anyway. It was in Chicago. It was called Roosevelt University, and they have the Chicago College of Performing Arts. I went there for a couple of years before coming back home, and that's a whole long story. I need to do another get to know me video because I know a lot of you guys are new around here, and I haven't shared in years just kind of a get to know me, what in the world, where I've come from type thing. So I'll put that on the docket for sure. But anyway, I remember vividly in the winter, going up to Chicago and peeling off all my layers, my coat and stuff, and we were auditioning. My dad had driven me up there. I was so nervous. I'd never done anything other than I did some community theater. I did theater in high school, but I didn't have training of any kind. So I go up to this big city a couple hours away from where we live, and like I said, we get there. I'm terribly nervous. I don't know that I'd ever even been to Chicago at that point. Maybe we had once or twice. I don't know. Anyway, we get up to the where we're supposed to be, and we're in this long hallway area, and there's all these people my age. They're stretching. I hear people warming up their voice. We're all about to audition for this college. And I'm looking around, and I am pale as a ghost because I'm thinking, I don't belong here. This has been a huge mistake. I still to this day do not feel comfortable warming up in front of anyone, including my own husband, vocally. I don't know what it is. I didn't really know a lot of stretches. I had no dance training at all. I had some once I went to college, but I'm still not great. My point being, I looked around and felt like such a fraud. I remember wanting to turn around to my dad and be like, let's just leave. I don't want to be here. I don't belong. These people are way, way ahead of the game for me. I don't belong. At the end of the day, I and there were many days of auditions. At the end of the day, I ended up making it into that school, and none of the people I saw there that day did. And that's not like a brag. It doesn't matter because I quit anyway. But it's just to show and to remind myself that, you know, these certain patterns we have in our mind of being like, oh, I'm not good enough because I don't do things that way, or I didn't have this proper training, or because XYZ don't really matter at the end of the day. You do your best at whatever it is and you move on. And if doing your best means you're doing your job right and you're continuing on day to day, or you get that job, or you get that audition, or you get that whatever book deal, then so be it. And if you don't, then you move on to the next thing. I see this in my oldest kid too. I see that like feeling of overwhelm when you feel like I can't do this. Like you start thinking through the steps of doing something. You're like, there's no way. And then when you actually do it on the other side, you're so proud of yourself. But I think a lot of people with severe, if you will, imposter syndrome don't even get to that proud of themselves part, because they're like, okay, phew, I survived that. They didn't find me out that time. And then you're moving on to the next worry, you know? And the other thing with theater is, even when I would get into a show, let's say, I would look around at the first rehearsal and be like, I don't belong here. Yet again, those same feelings rear their ugly head of like, oh my gosh, they're gonna, especially if they gave me a role, like one of the main roles, I'd be like, oh my gosh, all the people in the chorus are way better dancers than me, way better, like I don't deserve this. And so I would over prepare. I would way over prepare. I would rehearse like crazy at home. Is that necessarily a bad thing? I don't think so. I think it just is what it is, but it's definitely something I'm like learning about this. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, I over prepared there, or what, you know, whatever. So skipping through to teaching for me, I think teaching was for me the hardest thing when it came to this feeling of being a fraud. I started late because I did go to school for theater first. And so by the time I became a teacher, I felt like I was a few years behind my actual peers. Do you know what I mean? And so that I feel like didn't help, coupled with just a little healthy amount of social anxiety. The worst nights were meet the teacher nights, because I was the teacher and all the parents were older than me. And I just remember, I can feel that feeling so well, the, you know, sweaty palms. That was worse to me than any audition I've ever done. Like that was so much scarier. And especially with that, I'm like, oh, they're definitely going to find out I'm a fraud. Like first year teaching, I don't know how any of us, if you're a teacher, how did we ever survive the first year of teaching? Okay. I really don't know how I did. That was the scariest thing I've ever done. Long story short, definitely those same feelings of being found out. And then with YouTube, there's a reason I've only gone to like 2 brand events or whatever in my entire 11-year span, almost 11 and a half year span of YouTube, because I don't feel like I belong there. And I still don't. And I don't know that that is all completely imposter syndrome for me. I think it was originally. Now I think it's more that I don't necessarily fit in with a lot of the culture of, let's say, YouTube. And I don't, that sounds like no, I just mean that there are certain pockets of YouTube that I absolutely do. And then there's pockets that I just don't. And it's not that I wouldn't get along with some of these people if I met them. I think I would. It's not really my world. Like, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, I even still feel awkward if anyone is taking my photo. I was just telling Tyler the other day, I'm like, I want to get like an actual photo session and get like new profile pictures for my social media stuff. Like, I've never, ever, ever done that, ever. And I'm like, I think it's time. But I'm like, the idea of that gives me hives. Like, I can barely ask Tyler to be like, will you take a cute photo of me? And if it's not me just smiling at the camera, like if I'm trying to be like cutesy and artsy, I feel so embarrassed. Like, I can't do it. I am so jealous of people that do what I do and go out and get cute photos of them like looking to the side. So just so you know, one of my goals in the next few years is to be more comfortable just taking the photos I actually want to take. Like sometimes I really do want those cutesy photos, but I just feel dumb. So anyway, that's just one of my little side goals. So I want to talk about some of the positives of imposter syndrome, because I do think that there's a healthy amount of this that you can take away, and actually it makes you, I think, a better person for it. So there are 2 books I've recently been reading that touched on this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how perfect. So one of them is a book I'm nearly done reading, The Courage to be Disliked. And at one point, the philosopher in the book says that the idea of feeling inferior actually forces you to keep striving, setting goals, and just working to be better. And so then that feeling of inferiority or inadequacy actually is a strong propellant to actually push yourself forward and try different ways of doing things or try to improve yourself. And I do think there is that healthy amount of feeling. And so another book, 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think. I literally heard this today. I'm trying to finish this book. It's a little bit repetitive. It's a good book, but it's repetitive. I'm almost done with it. She said, you don't need to know what you're doing to still do something extraordinary. When you think about, one example she gave was Oprah, but when you think about anyone that's been successful, they started, most of them, started from nowhere. And they just thought, you know what, I'm just gonna try. And then they did it. And that led to the next thing, or the next movie, let's say, or the next talk show, or the next book deal, or the next job. And I just think that some people just have that like gusto, where they're just like, I don't really care. Let's just see what happens. And I don't. But sometimes I feel like kind of knowing this about yourself gives you the power back, because then you can almost take a step back and realize, okay, what I'm feeling right now is just this imposterism getting in my mind. What are the actual facts, right? So we're going to talk about that in a sec, but I want to also discuss the negative side of it. So there is a connection between this and burnout, depression and anxiety. And that's, you know, I think a lot of things can, I mean, obviously there are many things that can lead to depression and anxiety, okay? But I think the piece of it that was interesting to me was the burnout piece. It makes perfect sense that this could go hand in hand with feeling burnout more often. And I think creative types can definitely feel burnout a lot, but also people that are in jobs that don't allow for creativity too, like that can lead to burnout. But then when you add all of that and sprinkle it with a little dust of it feeling like a fraud and setting those high goals, a little bit of perfectionism, it's no wonder so many of us get to burnout all of the time. And my thing is, I feel like if I'm trying something that makes me nervous or like something new, if I can't see the path to that end goal with logistical steps in place, I just don't want to try it. I feel overwhelmed. I instantly shut down and decide, then I just can't do that. Like there's no way. For example, I would love to write a book. Okay. Why is this going to make me emotional? I would love to write a book. I've been working on a book. I feel like, well, I don't know anything about writing a book. I don't know anything about writing. I think I'm an okay writer. I don't know though. Like, how would I know? And you know, I got good grades in writing class, but that does not necessarily make you a good writer. My point being, like, I can't see all of the steps forward. So I just say, well, then I'm just never going to actually do it. Like, forget it. But I think I want to take my power back and decide, you know what, Jessica, the first step is writing the book. Write the book. Then you'll probably Google the next step. Like, okay, I have a book. What do I do next? Okay, what do I do next? And I think I need to become comfortable with the idea that I don't have to have it all laid out in front of me. Just what's the next right step? Okay, you've done that. What's the next right step? Because most people that have done anything worthwhile didn't know how they were going to do it. They just started. And I think one thing I want to kind of work on is when I'm feeling that feeling of inadequacy in any part of my life, just to, like I said, take a step back and ask myself, okay, what's real here and what's not? You know, what is the reality of my situation and what's really not? What is just that voice inside my head saying, you're not good enough, you suck? So one little side piece, if you're a parent, that you might find interesting, one of the questions posed was, how can you prevent your child from developing imposter syndrome? Listen, best laid plans for a parent. You do your best. You're going to screw something up with your kids. Like, there is no such thing as a perfect parent. But I love learning little things just to keep in the back of your mind to just attempt. So one thing they mentioned was there's two things that kind of could possibly contribute to this, right? It's not direct correlation necessarily, but constant criticism of like every little thing, nitpicking, but then also overly praising them. And so one of the things, and I remember learning this in like education classes too, was to not necessarily praise the outcome, but to praise their effort. So, you know, even with like my oldest will, you know, do some artwork and I will say, oh my gosh, instead of saying that's so beautiful, which I sometimes still say that, okay? You know, like, come on. But I'll ask her, how do you feel about it? Or I'll ask her like, was that enjoyable to do that? Ask her about the process of it or ask her to tell me about it instead of instantly jumping to, that is the best piece of artwork I've ever seen. Wow. Things like that. And I'm not perfect, trust, and I'm sure something I said there was wrong and someone's gonna school me. But you know what I'm saying? Like just adjusting the way that you talk about things so that it's not always oriented on, you are this high achiever and you must always be the best artist and the best reader and the best writer and the best mathematician. It's just a balance, I guess, is my point. So my final take on all of this, did I actually finish my makeup? I think I need a little powder. I'm amazed that I got my makeup done at all, if I'm being honest with you. I don't think imposter syndrome is a bad thing. I think it can get to bad levels, but I think you can view it in a healthy way by, like I said, taking that step backwards and really asking yourself, like, what's real, what's not. But I think that there can be healthy pieces to it. And I think there's a reason so many of us kind of are naturally inclined to this. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's something you need to like cure yourself from. I think just being aware of it is half the battle. And you're going to find, like I've even found in recent years that, because I remember learning about this like 10 years ago, in recent years, I found that I don't deal with as many of these feelings as much anymore because I'm just aware of, okay, that's what's going on in my head. Like, okay, Jessica, leave that in the past. Let's keep moving forward. There is this simple little imposter syndrome quiz you can take. I don't know how legit it is. Okay. So I'm just sharing it for fun, but it was like 20 questions. I'm going to pop up my results. So I kind of fit in the like not really suffering from it, if you will. But if I had taken this quiz like 8 or 10 years ago when I was first maybe learning about it, or especially before I'd ever learned about it, I would have definitely been higher on the scale. So I really do think that being aware of what's going on inside your own mind is half the battle. And one idea I thought was it was like, it's such a great thing to keep in your mind, a little mantra. Instead of fake it till you make it, think to yourself, face it until you make it. Really just facing whatever it is you think you can't do, that you know you can't do, or you think you can't do perfectly, whatever, or that job you don't think you're qualified for. One question I love, it was the title of a Mindy Kaling book, is why not me? Why not me? This other person that I'm going up against probably feels the same way I feel, and why shouldn't it be me? Why is someone else better fitted for this than I am? And I think that is such a powerful, powerful little question to ask yourself when you're faced with any of these things. Just that simple, why not me? Why is that person more deserving than I am? But I also do think that one of the beauties of imposter syndrome is I think it tends to make a lot of us a little more humble, because even though there can be negative pieces of it, I do think that the opposite of this is someone that is way overly confident, maybe a little more of a braggart or arrogant, whatever. Not that it's one or the other, but you know what I mean. And I think it's kind of beautiful that those of us that are kind of in this little neighborhood, you tend to be a little bit more humble because you do question all of your success. So anyway, boy, I hope you enjoyed this topic deep dive. Like I said earlier, check out my other Getting Real videos in my series. I would suggest the perfectionism one next. We also did one on trends, which I found really interesting. That one wasn't quite as serious, but still really, really interesting. So I love you all. I hope you'll subscribe, stick around, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.